Midnight passes. Then, 1 o'clock. The family sleeps. At 2 in the morning, they wake. All of them, not from nightmare or disturbance, but because this is the appointed hour. The father rises first, adds wood to the embers. The mother checks the children. They speak in low voices. They pray. They tend to needs. And in an hour, perhaps 2, they will return to bed and sleep again until dawn. This was not insomnia. This was life. Before electric lights imposed their ruthless schedule on human biology, sleep was not a single block of unconsciousness. It was segmented, divided, social, communal, and utterly unlike the 8-hour fortress of solitude we now consider normal. For 99% of human history, almost no one slept alone. Almost no one slept through the night. And almost no one slept in darkness so complete that their own hand was invisible before their face. The question we must ask is simple and troubling. Did we evolve to sleep the way we sleep now, or have we bent our ancient biology into an unnatural shape and called it progress? The night before electricity. We must first understand what night meant, what darkness was. In a world without electricity, night arrived with weight, with presence. Darkness was not an inconvenience to be banished with a switch. It was a fundamental condition of existence. The night had texture, depth, personality. It had sounds that existed nowhere else. It had rules. The night belonged to different forces than the day, to bandits and wolves, to spirits, or so people believed, that walked when sunlight failed. The night watch called the hours in medieval towns not merely to tell time, but to reassure sleeping citizens that order still held, that the darkness had not consumed everything. Candles were expensive. A single tallow candle, made from rendered animal fat, cost roughly what a laborer earned in half a day of work. Beeswax candles, which burned cleaner and brighter, cost 5 times that amount. A household might possess 6 candles for an entire year. Light was rationed like food during famine. An average household used perhaps 15 to 20 candles per month. At that rate, a family budgeted light the way we now budget heating oil or electricity. Light was precious. Light was power. And when the sun set, light became scarce. This scarcity shaped everything about how humans experienced night, and therefore how they slept. Chapter 1. The Architecture of Darkness. The bedroom, as we understand it, did not exist for most of human history. Privacy during sleep was a privilege reserved for royalty and the extraordinarily wealthy. Everyone else slept together. Family, servants, apprentices, laborers, guests, strangers passing through, all occupying the same spaces, sharing warmth, sharing darkness. Bed sharing was universal across class and culture. In medieval England, it was not uncommon for 6 or 8 people to share a single bed. Servants slept on the floor beside their employers. Children piled together like puppies for warmth. Travelers staying at inns expected to share beds with strangers, sometimes 3 or 4 strangers in a bed designed for 2. Samuel Pepys, the famous London diarist, recorded in 1669 that he and his wife shared their bed with their servant girl during a particularly cold winter. This was not scandalous. This was practical. The very idea of a master bedroom only emerged in the 18th century, and only among the wealthy. Before that, the Great Hall or main room served all purposes: eating, working, socializing, sleeping. As darkness fell, the same space that hosted dinner became a dormitory. Beds themselves were valuable property. A good bed could cost more than a cow, more than a year's wages for a laborer. Beds appeared in wills, passed down through generations like jewelry or land. The bed was often the most expensive single item a household owned. Wealthy households developed the enclosed bed, essentially a box with curtains that could be drawn shut. This created a room within a room, a private chamber suspended in the communal space. The curtains blocked drafts, held in warmth from bodies and sometimes from warming pans filled with hot coals. They also provided the only privacy available, acoustic, if not visual, for marital intimacy. These enclosed beds became status symbols. The fancier the curtains, the more elaborate the carvings, the higher your social standing. A merchant might scrimp on clothing, but invest in bed hangings that broadcast his wealth to every visitor who entered his hall. But even the wealthy rarely slept alone. In India, servants slept at the foot of their masters' beds, ready to wave fans during hot nights, or fetch water, or ward off mosquitoes. In China, concubines might share the sleeping platform with the patriarch and his principal wife, arranged by status. In medieval castles, pages and squires bedded down in their lord's chamber, sometimes on pallets at the foot of the bed, sometimes actually in the bed itself. The concept of private sleep, alone behind a locked door, undisturbed, would have seemed bizarre, lonely, perhaps even dangerous. Who would hear you if you cried out in the night? Who would tend you if you fell ill? Who would protect you from intruders or fire or the dark itself? Sleep was communal because life was communal. But here we arrive at perhaps the strangest truth about pre-industrial sleep. The truth that sounds like invention until you examine the sources. Until you read the diaries and court records and church documents and medical texts. Until you see it mentioned so casually, so frequently, that you realize this was not an aberration. This was normal. People did not sleep through the night. They slept in 2 shifts. The first sleep began shortly after dark, around 8 or 9 in the evening in winter, later in summer. This sleep lasted 3 or 4 hours. Then came the watch, the vigil, the interval, the time when people woke naturally, fully alert, and remained awake for 1 or 2 hours before returning to bed for the second sleep, which carried them through to dawn. This segmented pattern appears across cultures, across continents, across centuries. It shows up in Homer's Odyssey, in medieval prayer books, in doctors' manuals from the Renaissance, in depositions from criminal trials where witnesses mention being awake between sleeps when they heard suspicious noises, in diaries where people casually record what they did during the watch, prayed, made love, visited neighbors, tended fires, contemplated dreams, checked on children and livestock. The Catholic Church built its nighttime prayer schedule around this pattern. monks rose for matins, midnight prayers during the natural waking interval between first and second sleep. This wasn't fighting biology. This was working with it. Medical texts from the 16th century advised when to have sex based on which sleep you were between. The first sleep, they suggested, was best for marital relations. Bodies were warm, the night still young. The watch was for prayer, conversation, or vigilance. The second sleep was the deepest, the most restorative. One 16th century doctor wrote that the first sleep is more natural than the other. Another claimed, after the first sleep, one usually voids urine and sometimes stool, making the body lighter and more easily moved. The watch was considered prime time for intimate conversation between spouses. Historians examining depositions from divorce and annulment proceedings found repeated references to conversations during the watch, where couples discussed household matters, shared secrets, made plans, or resolved arguments. The darkness provided cover, the quiet provided space, and the natural waking rhythm provided the opportunity. One 17th century ballad described the watch as the time when the secrets of our hearts will know. A French physician in 1696 wrote about the watch so matter-of-factly that he assumed readers understood. One sleep was followed by an interval of waking, and another sleep again closed the eyes. But what did people actually do during these waking hours? They tended fires. The hearth was the heart of the household, and letting it die meant hours of work reigniting it, assuming you had flint and tinder. Better to wake, add fuel, bank the coals properly. This labor appears in countless sources. I rose in the watch to mend the fire appears in one diary. Woke at midnight, as is my custom, to tend the hearth. In another, they prayed. Religious devotionals specifically designed for the nighttime watch survive from medieval and early modern periods. Books of hours included prayers to be said upon waking in the night. The faithful were encouraged to use this natural waking period for contemplation, for examining their conscience, for communing with God when the world was quiet and dark. They visited neighbors in villages and close urban quarters. It was not unusual to knock on a neighbor's door during the watch, knowing they would likely be awake. Court records reveal this practice repeatedly. A Scottish criminal trial from 1598 records a witness stating, "I visited with my neighbor between first and second sleep, as we often do, and we spoke of the harvest. They made love." Medieval and Renaissance medical texts and religious writings reference marital relations specifically during the watch. The privacy afforded by darkness, the wakefulness that was expected, the intimacy of the quiet hours, these made the interval between sleeps a natural time for physical connection. They reflected on dreams. The first sleep was thought to produce vivid dreams, and the waking interval was considered ideal for analyzing them. Dreams held prophetic significance in many cultures. They were messages from God, warnings from ancestors, or glimpses of future events. The watch provided time to contemplate what the first sleep had revealed. They ate. Late-night snacks appear in household accounts and personal journals. Not full meals, but bread and ale, cheese, cold meat left from supper. One gentleman's diary from 1681 mentions eating cold pigeon pie in the watch, being unable to return to sleep immediately. They checked on children, livestock, property. Fathers walked through their workshops to ensure tools were secured and fires were safe. Mothers listened for children's breathing. Farmers visited barns to check on pregnant animals or sick creatures. Watchfulness was literal, and they simply lay awake, thinking, listening to the sounds of the house settling, of other sleepers breathing, of wind or rain, or the distant barking of dogs. The watch was a time of consciousness in darkness, a liminal state between the two sleeps, between the demands of day and the oblivion of deep rest. This pattern was so ingrained, so normal, that it disappeared from explicit discussion in most sources. People mentioned it the way we might mention having lunch, too obvious to require explanation. Only when the pattern began to change, began to vanish, did observers think to document it, and vanish it did. The end began with gaslighting, then electricity, then the factory whistle that demanded workers wake at a specific hour, not when their bodies naturally roused. The end came with clocks that ruled every hour, leaving no room for natural rhythms, with streetlights that made night navigable, making the watch seem unnecessary, with coffee and tea that allowed people to push through drowsiness rather than honor it. By 1850, urban Londoners were complaining about difficulty sleeping through the night. But now, instead of embracing the watch as natural, doctors labeled it insomnia, a disorder, something wrong with the body that needed treatment. The segmented sleep pattern that had governed human existence for millennia was forgotten within 2 generations. Forgotten so completely that when historians rediscovered it in old texts in the 1990s, the findings seemed revolutionary, impossible. Surely, people had always slept the way we sleep now, but they had not. Historian Roger Eckert spent 16 years combing through archives, court depositions, diaries, medical texts, literature, documenting hundreds of references to segmented sleep. His findings, published in 2001, revealed that the 2-sleep pattern was universal across Western society until the modern era. Not an oddity, not a disorder, the default. Sleep scientist Thomas Ware conducted an experiment. He placed subjects in darkness for 14 hours each night, mimicking winter conditions before artificial light. Within weeks, their sleep patterns naturally split. 4 hours of sleep, 1 to 2 hours awake. The body, given darkness and time, returned to the ancient rhythm. The implications are profound. If humans evolved to sleep in segments, what does it mean that we now compress sleep into a single block? Are we fighting our biology? Is the modern epidemic of insomnia actually our bodies trying to express a natural pattern that our schedules no longer accommodate? These are questions we will return to. But first, we must understand what sleep looked like in practical terms. The furniture, the rituals, the intimate details of how people actually spent those dark hours. Chapter 2: The Bed as Fortress and Stage. Before we can understand pre-electric sleep, we must understand the bed itself. The bed was not merely furniture, it was architecture, theater, fortress, symbol of wealth and status. The bed was where you were born, where you conceived children, where you entertained important guests, where you conducted business, where you died. The bed was the center of domestic life. In great households, the Lord's bed sat on a raised platform called a dais, visible to the entire hall. This was deliberate. The bed was meant to be seen, a display of wealth, a statement of power. The finest beds had canopies supported by elaborately carved posts, hung with curtains that might cost more than a peasant earned in a lifetime. The great bed of Ware, constructed around 1590, measured 10 feet and 8 inches wide, large enough to sleep 15 people, according to one account. It became famous across England, mentioned in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Travelers made pilgrimages to inns just to sleep in it. The bed was a tourist attraction, a wonder of craftsmanship, a piece of theater. French kings held court from their beds. The lever du roi, the king's rising, was a formal ceremony where courtiers gathered to watch the monarch wake, dress, and begin the day. The evening coucher reversed the process, with nobles vying for the privilege of handing the king his nightshirt. The bed was the throne of the private hours, but beds were also practical necessity. In an age without central heating, the bed was the warmest place in the house. The curtains around enclosed beds served multiple purposes. They blocked drafts, held in body heat, provided darkness for sleep even when others in the room were awake and active, and offered acoustic privacy for conversation. The curtains also protected against genuine dangers: bed bugs, fleas, lice, rats that might venture from their holes at night. The curtains created a barrier, however imperfect, between sleepers and the nocturnal activity of vermin. The warming pan was essential technology. A metal pan with a long handle filled with hot coals from the hearth was passed between the sheets before bed to remove the deadly chill. On winter nights, sheets could be cold enough to shock the body into wakefulness. The warming pan made sleep possible. Beds were constructed to address the cold. Mattresses sat atop a lattice of ropes that could be tightened when they sagged, hence the phrase, "sleep tight." The ropes created airspace beneath the mattress, providing insulation from cold floors. Multiple mattresses were often stacked. First, a coarse straw mattress, then a finer one of feathers or wool. Pillows were stuffed with everything from goose down to buckwheat hulls to straw. Depending on wealth, the very poor might have no pillow at all, or a pillow of folded cloth. The wealthy commissioned pillows of finest down, covered in linen so fine it was called Holland cloth. Blankets were wool primarily. Heavy, scratchy, essential. In extreme cold, households piled on wool blankets, fur coverlets, and even their own daytime clothing. People slept in caps to preserve body heat. Up to 30% of body heat escapes through the head. Nightcaps were not decorative. They were survival equipment. For the poor, the bed might be nothing more than a sack filled with straw laid directly on the floor. In cities, the desperately poor slept on straw scattered in corners, in doorways, under stairs. In medieval London, vagrants could pay a penny to sleep in a penny hang, a rope stretched across a room where sleepers draped themselves, hanging forward over the rope. to rest. When the proprietor wanted them out in the morning, he cut the rope, and sleepers collapsed to the floor. This was called getting the chop. The better-off poor might afford a truckle bed, a low bed on wheels that could be rolled under a larger bed during the day, pulled out at night. Servants slept in truckle beds in their master's chambers. Children used them. Apprentices, anyone of lower status who needed proximity to someone of higher rank. Beds accumulated value over lifetimes. A family might begin marriage with a simple straw mattress and gradually upgrade, adding a rope lattice frame, then a feather mattress, then curtains, then carved posts. The bed grew with the family's fortunes. A merchant who prospered displayed that prosperity most visibly in his bed. When wealthy individuals died, their beds were often the most valuable items in their estates. Probate inventories from Tudor England show beds valued at more than the house they sat in. A fine bed could be worth £50 when a laborer earned £10 in a year. The bed was an investment, an heirloom, a statement of who you were. The intimacy of shared sleep in pre-industrial society is difficult for modern sensibilities to fully grasp. We are accustomed to privacy, to personal space, to the idea that our sleeping body is our own domain, shared only with chosen partners. This was not the historical norm. When travelers stayed at inns, they expected to share beds with strangers. This was not a last resort. It was standard practice. 3 or 4 travelers might share a bed, lying head to toe to maximize space. Different genders might share if the travelers were married couples or families. Single men and women were usually separated, but the separation was by room, not by bed, within the room. Etiquette guides from the 16th and 17th centuries provided advice on how to share a bed with strangers. Do not steal the blankets. Do not crowd your bedmate. Do not speak of what occurs in the shared bed. Discretion was paramount. If your companion snores, bear it with patience. Benjamin Franklin wrote about sharing a bed with John Adams during their diplomatic travels. The 2 men argued about whether to leave the window open, Franklin favoring fresh air, Adams fearing the night vapors would cause illness. They debated for an hour before sleeping, crammed into a bed barely large enough for one. George Washington's account books record payments for 2 beds when traveling, a luxury that marked him as wealthy. Most travelers made do with shared accommodations. The practice extended beyond inns. Apprentices shared beds. Siblings shared beds well into adolescence and sometimes adulthood. Servants shared. Soldiers shared. Sailors in their hammocks hung so close they touched. Monks in monasteries had individual narrow beds, but these were placed side by side with no partitions. Privacy was neither expected nor desired. In many households, children of different genders shared beds until puberty, and sometimes beyond, if space was limited. Parents often shared beds with infants and young children, both for warmth and for practical nursing purposes. The infant tucked beside the mother could be fed during the night without anyone fully waking. This practice carried risks. Infant overlaying, accidental smothering when a parent rolled onto a child during sleep, was a recognized danger. Medieval church law addressed it specifically, imposing penances on mothers whose infants died this way. Coroners' inquests from the period frequently record such deaths. Some cultures developed specific sleeping technologies to protect infants. The arcuccio in Italy, a wooden frame placed over the infant in the parent's bed, created a protective barrier. Similar devices appeared across Europe. The awareness of danger coexisted with the practical necessity of shared sleep in cold houses with limited bedding. Elderly parents often shared beds with adult children who cared for them. The sick shared beds with caregivers. The dying were attended in their beds by family members who might doze beside them during long vigils. The bed was a communal space because life was communal. Solitary sleep was associated with isolation, illness, or death. To sleep alone was pitiable, concerning, a sign that something was wrong. Even in death, the bed remained a communal space. The dying lay in state in their beds, while family and community gathered for vigil. The corpse was washed and prepared for burial on the deathbed. Mourners might spend the night with the body, keeping watch, praying, sharing memories. The bed witnessed everything: birth, death, illness, recovery, marriage, conception, argument, reconciliation, prayer, conversation, reading, business dealings. The bed was where life happened. And because the bed was communal, sleep itself was social. The sounds of others breathing, the warmth of bodies nearby, the small conversations in darkness, the knowledge that you were not alone. For most of human history, to be alone in sleep was to be abandoned, vulnerable, exposed to dangers both real and imagined. We will speak more of those dangers, of what lurked in the darkness beyond the bed curtains, of what people feared when the lights went out. But first, we must understand one more aspect of pre-electric sleep, one that will seem strangest of all to modern ears. The idea that sleep itself was not a single state, but rather a journey through different realms of consciousness, each with its own character, its own purpose, its own name. Chapter 3. The Landscapes of Sleep. The ancients understood something we have forgotten: that sleep is not uniform, not a single state of unconsciousness, but a progression through different territories of awareness, each with its own qualities and purposes. The Greeks and Romans described different depths of sleep with different names. Sopor was light sleep, easily broken. Somnus was deeper sleep, restorative. Sopor led to somnus. Somnus led to dreams, and dreams led either back to waking or deeper into the territory of death's brother. Sleep and death were related in ancient thought. Thanatos, death, and hypnos, sleep, were twin gods. Sleep was a small death. Death was eternal sleep. Every night you practiced dying, and every morning you practiced resurrection. At the temples of Asclepius, the god of healing, supplicants underwent ritual preparation, fasting, bathing, prayer, before sleeping in special chambers called abatons. There, they sought healing dreams. The god would visit them in sleep, either curing them directly or prescribing remedies they should follow upon waking. Thousands of inscriptions survive recording successful cures. I came blind and left seeing. I came lame and walked home. Whether the cures were real or psychosomatic matters less than this. The ancients believed sleep was a threshold state where divine communication occurred, where transformation happened. where the boundaries between worlds grew thin. This understanding of sleep as liminal space, neither fully in this world nor fully out of it, persisted through medieval Christianity. Dreams were portals, messages from God, warnings from demons, visits from the dead, prophecies of the future. Medieval dream visions, works like Dante's Divine Comedy, The Romance of the Rose, Piers Plowman, framed profound theological and philosophical insights as experiences received in sleep. The dreamer falls asleep and journeys to heaven, hell, or allegorical landscapes where they encounter personified virtues, vices, and divine figures who teach them truths about reality. These were not presented as fiction, but as genuine visionary experiences that occurred in the landscape of sleep. Sleep was not escape from reality. Sleep provided access to deeper realities invisible in waking life. Common people, not just poets and theologians, took dreams seriously. Peasants consulted dream interpreters before making major decisions. Dreams of dead relatives were treated as actual visits from beyond death. Dreams warning of danger were heeded as divine protection. The practice of dream interpretation was ubiquitous. Books explaining the symbolic meaning of dream images circulated widely, though many who consulted them could not read and relied on local wise people to interpret. To dream of losing teeth meant death in the family. To dream of clear water meant good fortune. To dream of muddy water meant trouble ahead. To dream of the dead speaking meant heeding their warnings. In Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad received divine revelation in dreams. True dreams, ruya, were distinguished from false dreams caused by devils or digestion. The science of dream interpretation, tabir, was a respected field of knowledge. Scholars wrote extensive treatises classifying dream symbols and their meanings. Chinese tradition divided dreams into categories based on when they occurred during the night and what the dreamer had eaten or experienced during the day. Spring dreams differed from autumn dreams. Dreams after rice differed from dreams after wine. The liver controlled one type of dream, the spleen another. Dreams revealed imbalances in the body's humors and energies. Across cultures, the universal thread was this: sleep was not absence of consciousness, but different consciousness. Not nothing, but something. A territory to be explored, interpreted, respected, and sometimes feared. But sleep in the pre-electric world was not simply peaceful slumber punctuated by meaningful dreams. Sleep was also vulnerable, dangerous, contested territory between the living and forces that ruled the darkness. The night was not empty. It was populated. By animals, certainly. Wolves in Europe, tigers in Asia, leopards in Africa, bears across the northern hemisphere. Real predators that might approach human settlements when hunger drove them. But also by things less tangible. Things that lived in the borderlands between belief and reality. Every culture had its night terrors, its explanations for what moved in darkness, what watched from forests, what scratched at shutters, what pressed down on the chest of sleepers, stealing breath, inducing paralysis and dread. The mare, the nightmare. The nightmare was originally not a bad dream, but a creature a demon, spirit, or witch that sat on sleepers' chests, causing suffocation, paralysis, and terror. The word appears across Germanic languages, Mara in Old Norse, Mare in Middle English, Mar in German, Mara in Swedish. The creature pressed down, stole breath, induced visions of horror. We now call this experience sleep paralysis, a neurological phenomenon where the brain wakes while the body remains in remitonia, the muscle paralysis that prevents us from acting out dreams. The sufferer is conscious but cannot move, often experiencing vivid hallucinations and a sensation of pressure on the chest. Modern sleep science explains it mechanistically, but for people experiencing this in dark cottages, alone or surrounded by sleeping family members who could not be roused no matter how desperately the mind screamed for help, the explanation was obvious. Something was attacking. Something malevolent had entered the sleeping space and meant harm. Protection against night spirits took many forms. Iron was powerful. Horseshoes, scissors placed under pillows, iron nails in bedposts. Iron disrupted magic, repelled fairies, demons, and witches. In Scotland, people placed shoes by the bed with toes pointing away from the sleeper to confuse spirits about which direction the person faced. Herbs offered protection. Rosemary, rue, and vervain hung over beds or tucked into mattresses. Garlic, both for vampires in regions where such beliefs existed, and for general evil. In parts of Germany, people carved crosses into bed frames. In Russia, icons watched over sleepers, and prayers were said before closing eyes. These were not quaint superstitions to the people who practiced them. These were necessary precautions against real dangers. The night was genuinely threatening, and the protections were as practical as locking doors. In Salem, Massachusetts, in 1692, the testimony of young women describing nighttime visits from specters of accused witches was taken as legal evidence. The afflicted girls described being choked in their beds, pinched, struck by invisible hands. They woke with marks on their bodies, gasping for air, having seen the spectral forms of their neighbors tormenting them in the night. Whether these experiences were deliberate fabrication, mass hysteria, sleep paralysis, or genuine belief in supernatural attack, matters less than this. The courtroom believed them. The community believed them. 20 people were executed based partly on testimony about what occurred during sleep. The boundary between dreams and reality, between sleeping visions and waking truth, was not as clear as we now assume it should be. What you experienced in the vulnerable hours of darkness was real enough to kill over. The night was not silent. In cities and towns, the night watch called the hours. 10 o'clock and all is well rang through streets, reassuring sleeping citizens that order prevailed, that no fire had broken out, that no thieves prowled, that the watch remained vigilant. In London, the watch called every hour from dusk to dawn. In Paris, the Get called the hours and the weather. Il est minuit. Il fait beau temps. It is midnight. The weather is fine. The calls penetrated into sleeping chambers, marking the passage of night, structuring the darkness. Church bells marked the hours as well. Cathedral bells rang for matins at midnight, lauds before dawn, prime at sunrise. Monastery bells governed the prayer schedule. Town bells rang curfew, the couvre-feu, cover fire, signaling when hearth fires should be banked and honest folk should be indoors. The bells structured time, but also claimed spiritual authority over the night. Their sound drove away demons, or so belief held. Storm bells rang during severe weather to disperse evil spirits riding the wind. Passing bells rang when someone died, announcing the soul's departure and asking prayers for its journey. In rural areas without bells or watchmen, other sounds marked the night. Dogs barking at shadows or real intruders. Owls calling, sometimes interpreted as death omens. Foxes screaming, a sound unsettling enough that people often mistook it for a woman in distress. Wolves howling, wind in thatch, rain on roofs, the settling and creaking of timber buildings. Inside sleeping chambers, the sounds were intimate. Breathing of bedmates, snoring, children crying, coughs and sighs, the crackle of dying fires, mice in the walls, insects, the occasional sleep talker muttering incomprehensible phrases that might sound like prophecy or confession. Samuel Pepys recorded in his diary that he often lay awake listening to the sounds of London at night. Church bells, the watch calling, cats fighting, drunks singing, coaches rattling over cobblestones. The city never fully slept, and neither did its chronicler, at least not continuously. For those in rural areas, night sounds carried different meanings. Silence was suspicious. If the dogs stopped barking, something had either left or something so threatening had arrived that even the dogs dared not announce it. Unusual sounds demanded investigation. A sound like footsteps might be a traveler in need, a thief, or simply the settling of frost-cracked wood. People developed intimate knowledge of the sounds their own houses made. They could distinguish between wind rattling a shutter and a hand testing a latch, between the creak of familiar floorboards contracting in cold and the creak of weight upon stairs. This acoustic literacy was survival. On the frontier, night sounds meant different things. Native Americans moving through forest, wild animals, fellow settlers in distress, raiders. The interpretation could mean life or death, and the wrong response, ignoring danger or shooting at innocent sounds, carried consequences. Families developed systems, passwords for identifying friendly visitors in darkness, specific knocks, agreed upon calls. The negotiation of safety in darkness required protocol, communication, trust, and always, underneath, the awareness that night belonged to different rules, that the world changed when the sun set, that what was safe in daylight became risky in darkness. Some places were more dangerous at night than others. Crossroads where the living world intersected with the realm of the dead. Bridges over water where spirits lingered. Graveyards, obviously. The gallows where criminals hung. Places of execution. Battlefields. Sites of murder or suicide. These locations accumulated supernatural danger. The restless dead walked there. Spirits of those who died violently, those denied proper burial, those with unfinished business. The revenant, the one who returns, might be encountered on night roads, especially where they died. In Eastern Europe, the vampire was not the romanticized aristocrat of later fiction, but a bloated corpse that left its grave to attack the living, spreading plague and death. Villages exhumed suspected vampires and drove stakes through corpses, cut off heads, burned remains. These were not metaphorical threats. These were urgent public health responses to unexplained deaths that clustered in communities. Deaths we might now attribute to disease vectors, but which seemed then to spread from one victim to others in patterns suggesting supernatural predation. The belief in malevolent returning dead was nearly universal. In China, the Jiangshi, the hopping corpse, drained life force from victims. In Japan, vengeful ghosts called yurei haunted those who wronged them. In Celtic lands, the fetch or doppelganger appeared as an omen of death. In Arabia, the ghoul lurk in graveyards and deserts, feeding on corpses and unwary travelers. These were not entertainment. These were explanations for real phenomena, unexplained deaths, epidemics, sleep paralysis experiences, missing persons, mysterious sounds in night. In the absence of germ theory, forensic science, and modern medicine, supernatural explanations made sense. They provided frameworks for understanding and, crucially, for taking action against threats. In many African cultures, night belonged to the ancestors and spirits. The living conducted business in daylight. After dark, the spiritual realm asserted itself. Proper protections, offerings, prayers, rituals, protective objects, maintained boundaries. Failure to observe protocols invited danger. The night witch, whether European strega, African witch, or Asian demon, was a figure of terror precisely because she violated the safety of sleep. She entered homes uninvited. She attacked the vulnerable and helpless. She turned the necessary rest of sleep into an opportunity for harm. Modern sleep science would later identify many of these experiences as sleep disorders, sleep paralysis, night terrors, sleepwalking. But naming them neurological phenomena does not erase the terror of experiencing them in darkness, alone, or among sleepers who cannot help, in an era when darkness itself was profound and threatening. Chapter 4. The Rituals of Retiring. Going to bed was not a simple act of lying down. It was a process, a ritual that varied by wealth and status, but existed at every social level. For the wealthy, retiring involved servants, hair unpinned and brushed, elaborate day clothing removed and replaced with night clothes, face washed, teeth cleaned with cloths and tooth powders made from crushed chalk, charcoal, or powdered brick, mixed with herbs like mint or sage, the bed warmed with warming pans, chamber pots positioned, bed curtains arranged, candles placed for nighttime needs, but positioned safely away from flammable fabrics. The lady or gentleman might say evening prayers, either alone or with the household gathered. In Catholic households before the Reformation, prayers to the Virgin Mary and guardian angels for protection through the night. In Protestant households afterward, prayers for God's watch care and thanksgiving for the day's provisions. For the poor, the ritual was simpler but no less real. Bank the fire carefully, let it die completely, and you face hours of work rekindling it tomorrow. Check that doors were barred and shutters fastened, chamber pots in position. Going outside to the privy in deep night was avoided when possible. Children's last trip outside to relieve themselves before bed. A crust of bread and drink of water or small beer. Prayer remained constant across classes. Even the illiterate knew prayers by rote. The Lord's Prayer, simple petitions for safety, thanks for survival through another day, which was never guaranteed. Personal hygiene practices varied widely by period and culture, but some nighttime washing was common. Hands and face at minimum. Feet, if one had been traveling or working in fields. In wealthier households, full bathing before bed was occasionally practiced, though bathing frequency varied dramatically by culture and period. Romans bathed frequently, though public bathhouses closed at dark. So evening bathing happened at home for those wealthy enough to have facilities. The bath was social and practical. Cleanliness, yes, but also relaxation, a transition from the public day to private night. In Japan, bathing before sleep was cultural practice. The ofuro, soaking in hot water, washing away the day's pollution, purifying before rest. The bath and sleep were connected through concepts of cleanliness, transition, and renewal. Medieval Europeans bathed less frequently overall, but washing hands and face before prayers was common. Water was often mistrusted. Medical theory held that bathing opened pores, allowing disease miasmas to enter. So, instead, people changed linen undergarments frequently, believing the linen absorbed body impurities. Teeth cleaning practices varied enormously. Romans used toothpicks and sometimes abrasive powders. Medieval Europeans might use twigs frayed into brushes or cloths rubbed with salt. The wealthy used elaborate tooth powders. The poor rinsed with water or simply didn't clean teeth regularly. Dental health was generally poor across populations, but the nightly ritual of oral care existed for those who practiced it. Hair care before bed mattered, especially for women. Long hair needed to be braided or covered to prevent tangling, to protect from lice, to maintain modesty. In some cultures, sleeping with hair loose was considered dangerous, inviting spirits, or causing nightmares. Nightcaps served practical purposes: warmth, cleanliness, propriety. The final acts before sleep had symbolic weight, extinguishing most lights, leaving perhaps one candle or oil lamp burning low in case of need, but conserving precious fuel. A last check of children, a last prayer, a last word with a spouse or bedmate. In many households, couples talked before sleep. During that first period before the watch, discussed the day, made plans, shared concerns, spoke of things too private for daylight hours when servants or children might overhear. The darkness and privacy of the bed created space for intimacy, emotional, verbal, physical. The transition from waking to sleeping was gradual, not a switch flipped, but a dimming. The world grew quieter, darker. The rhythms of day receded. The different rules of night asserted themselves, and then the first sleep descended, deep, heavy, restorative. The body released the day. The mind drifted into dreams. The watch would come later in the deep hours after midnight. But for now, sleep claimed its territory. Darkness covered the land. Fires burned low. Families lay together in warmth. The night stretched ahead, vast and patient. And in that darkness, humans surrendered consciousness, trusting in God, in protective charms, in the strength of doors and shutters, in the watchfulness of dogs, in luck, in fate, in whatever forces governed the unseen hours. Sleep, in the world before electricity, was an act of faith. In the world before electricity, when night fell over the land, darkness was nearly absolute. From any height, looking across countryside or even cities, you would see a landscape of darkness, punctuated by pinpricks of light. Scattered, precious, vulnerable. This was the ocean in which pre-electric sleep floated. Not just the practice of sleeping, but the context, the sensory environment, the reality that shaped every aspect of how humans experience those vulnerable hours. Modern humans cannot truly imagine this darkness. We live in a world of ambient light, street lamps, car headlights, the glow of cities visible from miles away. Light pollution so pervasive that 2/3 of humanity cannot see the Milky Way from where they live. Even in our homes, LED indicators on electronics, night lights, the glow of screens, we are bathed in light even when we think we're in darkness. The contrast is absolute. In the pre-electric world, night meant darkness so complete that you could not see your hand before your face. In the modern world, true darkness barely exists. This transformation happened remarkably quickly. Gas lighting appeared in cities in the early 1800s. Electric street lighting followed by the 1880s. Within 2 generations, the night that had governed human existence for all of history was fundamentally altered, and with it, sleep transformed. The first sleep, called first sleep, dead sleep, or beauty sleep, began shortly after dark and lasted approximately 3 to 4 hours. This was the deepest, most restorative period of sleep. The body temperature dropped to its lowest point. Heart rate slowed. The sleeper was difficult to wake. Modern sleep science confirms this pattern. When human subjects are placed in darkness for extended periods mimicking pre-electric conditions, their sleep naturally segments. They fall into deep sleep quickly, remain in slow-wave sleep for several hours, then wake naturally. This first sleep was when the body performed its most crucial maintenance: tissue repair, immune system strengthening, memory consolidation, the deep, dreamless void where consciousness disappeared completely. In the 1990s, psychiatrist Thomas Ware conducted experiments placing subjects in darkness for 14 hours each night, approximating the natural light-dark cycle of winter before artificial lighting. After several weeks of adjustment, subjects settled into a pattern: 4 hours of sleep, 1 to 2 hours of quiet wakefulness, then another 4 hours of sleep. This was not insomnia. The subjects did not feel distressed during the waking period. They lay peacefully, thinking, sometimes meditating. Their brain activity during these hours showed a pattern Ware called alpha waves, the same pattern seen in deep meditation or prayer. They described feeling calm, contemplative, extraordinarily creative. When the experiment ended and subjects returned to normal lighting and sleep schedules, They reported missing the middle of the night waking period, missing the peace, the clarity, the sense of time outside. Historical sources describe the watch in terms that match Vare's findings remarkably. The watch was characterized as peaceful, contemplative, a time of unusual mental clarity. One 17th century manual of devotions described it as that natural season of meditation which happens after the first sleep. The Scottish physician Andrew Bordy wrote, in 1547, "The first sleep is more natural than the second sleep, and after the first sleep, men do use to evacuate the body with natural excretions." He recommended using the watch for prayer and contemplation. An English prayer manual from 1656 contained specific prayers for the watch, not prayers for insomnia, but prayers specifically designed for this expected period of nighttime wakefulness. The prayers were contemplative, introspective, focused on examining one's conscience and relationship with God. What did people do during the watch? The sources tell us they tended fires, the most practical necessity. Let the fire die completely, and you faced difficulty or impossibility rekindling it. Better to wake, add fuel, arrange the embers properly. This appears in countless diaries and household records. "Rose in the watch to mend the fire," wrote one English gentlewoman in her diary in 1683. They prayed. Religious devotion filled this quiet hour. Catholics said rosaries or offices of the Blessed Virgin. Protestants read scripture or prayed extemporaneously. The silence and darkness made prayer feel more immediate, more concentrated. God seemed closer in the watch than in the busy daylight hours. They made love. Medical texts and religious writings reference sexual relations during the watch. The warmth of bodies in bed, the privacy of darkness, the peaceful wakefulness. These created natural opportunity. Some medical authorities believed conception was more likely during the watch because both partners were partially rested, yet still warm from sleep. They talked. Quiet conversations between spouses, parents and children, friends sharing beds. The watch was considered prime time for honest conversation. The darkness removed visual social cues, making certain discussions easier. Court depositions from trials frequently mention things said or overheard during the watch, evidence that such conversations were routine and expected. One 17th century letter writer described the watch as when we speak most truly, for the night strips away pretense. In villages and close urban quarters, it was not unusual to knock on a neighbor's door during the watch, knowing they would likely be awake. Criminal trial records from Scotland preserve testimony of witnesses who visited with my neighbor between first and second sleep, as is our custom. They ate light meals. References to eating during the watch appear in household accounts and personal journals. Not full meals, but bread and cheese, cold meat, ale, or wine. One English gentleman recorded in his diary eating cold capon and a manchet of bread during the watch when he found himself unable to return immediately to second sleep. They reflected on dreams from the first sleep. Dream interpretation manuals recommended contemplating dreams during the watch when the mind was clear, but the dreams still fresh. The watch was considered ideal for understanding dream symbolism before the day's activities obscured the memory. They checked on children, livestock, Fathers walked through workshops ensuring all was secure. Mothers listened at children's beds. Farmers visited barns to check on animals, particularly during birthing seasons or when livestock was ill. They simply lay awake, thinking, contemplating, existing in quiet wakefulness without the pressure to be productive or social. The watch was a liminal time, neither day nor night, neither fully awake nor asleep. A space outside the normal flow of time. Multiple sources describe this contemplative quality. One French writer in 1700 compared the watch to standing in an empty cathedral. The mind finds space to breathe. Modern humans who experience middle-of-the-night wakefulness often feel anxious. We interpret wakefulness as insomnia, as a problem to be solved. We check clocks, calculate how many hours of sleep we've lost, worry about tomorrow's fatigue, take pills, turn on devices, fight the wakefulness. But in the pre-electric world, the watch was expected, normal. There was no anxiety about it because it was simply what bodies did. The modern concept of sleeping through the night as the healthy norm did not exist. The 8-hour monophasic sleep block was not yet standard. The contrast is striking. Pre-electric people woke naturally after first sleep and accepted the watch as normal. Modern people wake in the night and experience it as dysfunction. Some sleep researchers now argue that what we call middle-of-the-night insomnia, waking after 3 or 4 hours and remaining awake for an hour or two before sleeping again, may not be insomnia at all. It may be the ancient segmented sleep pattern attempting to express itself despite our efforts to suppress it. When people stop fighting the nighttime waking, stop watching the clock, stop taking pills to force continuous sleep, when they simply accept the wakefulness and rest quietly, many report the anxiety disappears. The wakefulness becomes peaceful rather than distressing. This is not medical advice. Modern sleep disorders are real and often require treatment. But it raises questions. How much of modern sleep dysfunction stems from trying to force biology into an unnatural pattern? From fighting our evolutionary heritage? After the watch, lasting 1 to 2 hours typically, came the second sleep. This carried sleepers through to dawn. The second sleep had a different character than the first. It was lighter, more prone to dreams. The body temperature began rising slightly. Heart rate increased marginally. The sleep was less deep, but often described as more pleasant, more refreshing. Modern sleep science explains this pattern REM sleep. The stage associated with vivid dreams occurs in longer cycles as the night progresses. In segmented sleep, the second sleep period would contain more REM and less slow-wave sleep than the first period. Historical sources describe the second sleep as dream-rich. The visions and prophecies that came in sleep were more likely to occur in the second sleep than the first. The meaningful dreams, the visits from the dead, the divine messages. The second sleep ended naturally with dawn, or shortly before. The body's circadian rhythm responded to approaching daylight even when no light was yet visible. Internal biological clocks anticipated dawn. In summer, when days were long, second sleep might last 5 or 6 hours. In winter, When nights stretched 14 hours or more, second sleep might last only 2 or 3 hours. The rest of the dark hours were spent in the watch or in quiet wakefulness before rising. The total sleep per night varied by season, but averaged 7 to 9 hours. Similar to modern recommendations, but distributed differently. Not compressed into a single block, but divided with a period of contemplative wakefulness between. The waking process was gradual. No alarm clocks, no harsh buzzing or music yanking consciousness from sleep. The body woke when it was ready, responding to light, to sounds of the household stirring, to bladder fullness, to hunger. Servants in great households were expected to wake before their masters, but even they often woke naturally, rather than being forcibly roused. The day began when bodies and circumstances dictated, not when a machine commanded. This natural waking aligned with circadian rhythms in ways our modern alarm clock culture does not. Waking naturally at the end of a sleep cycle rather than in the middle of one meant less grogginess, less sleep inertia, less cognitive impairment upon waking. Of course, this idealized picture had exceptions. Soldiers on campaign were roused by drums or trumpets at commanded hours. Night workers, bakers for instance, who needed bread ready for morning markets, worked against natural rhythms. But for most people, most of the time, sleep and waking followed biological rather than mechanical schedules. Chapter 5, The Theft of Night. On January 28, 1807, Pall Mall in London became the first street in the world illuminated by gaslight. The demonstration drew crowds who marveled at light brighter and steadier than anything they had experienced. Within 15 years, most major streets in London had gas lighting. Paris followed. Then, New York, Boston, gas lighting spread through cities of Europe and America with remarkable speed. The impact was immediate and profound. Streets that had been dangerous at night became navigable. Businesses could remain open after dark. Social life extended into evening hours. Theater performances could start later. Dinner parties ran long without guests, fearing the dark journey home. But the transformation went deeper than convenience. Gaslighting began eroding the fundamental relationship between humans and darkness, between humans and natural time, between humans and sleep. The factory system demanded labor around the clock. Expensive machinery needed to run continuously to justify its cost. Gas lighting made night shifts possible. Workers could tend machines at midnight as easily as at noon, or so factory owners believed. In reality, the human body does not adapt well to night work. Circadian rhythms evolved over millions of years cannot be overridden by artificial light. Night workers experienced higher rates of accidents, illness, and exhaustion. But the economic pressure to maximize production was relentless. The factory whistle replaced the church bell as the sound that structured time. 7 a.m. start, noon lunch, 6 p.m. end. The natural rhythms of sleep and waking gave way to mechanical schedules. Sleep became compressed into the hours between shifts rather than flowing with darkness. For industrial workers, segmented sleep became impossible. They had perhaps 6 or 7 hours between shifts, barely enough for single block sleep, let alone the leisurely pattern of first sleep watch, and second sleep. The natural rhythm was crushed by economic necessity. Medical authorities began warning about the health effects. Doctors noted increased nervous disorders, digestive problems, and what they called neurasthenia, nervous exhaustion from the pace of modern industrial life. But most significantly for our story, doctors began describing a new complaint: difficulty sleeping through the night. Middle of the night wakefulness that was previously normal and expected was now being pathologized as insomnia. An 1850 medical text described the modern affliction of waking in the night and being unable to return to sleep, presenting this as a new problem requiring treatment rather than as the ancient watch reasserting itself. Patent medicines promising to cure insomnia flooded the market. Laudanum, opium, dissolved in alcohol, chloral hydrate, bromides, sleeping drafts containing everything from alcohol to mercury to morphine. The idea took hold that healthy sleep meant sleeping continuously through the night, that waking in the middle of the night indicated dysfunction, that the goal was 8 uninterrupted hours. This represented a complete reversal of thousands of years of human sleep experience. But it happened so quickly, within 2 generations, that the memory of segmented sleep was almost entirely lost. By 1900, references to first sleep and second sleep had largely disappeared from common language. The watch was forgotten. Sleeping through the night became the gold standard of healthy rest. And those whose bodies insisted on waking after 3 or 4 hours, who lay peacefully awake for an hour before sleeping again, they were told something was wrong with them. Then came electricity. And with it, the night ended. Not metaphorically, not gradually. The arrival of electric lighting in cities between 1880 and 1920 represented the most dramatic transformation in human sensory experience since fire itself. Thomas Edison's Pearl Street Station in New York began operation on September 4th, 1882, providing electric light to a small district of Manhattan. Within 30 years, electric lighting had spread through every major city in the industrialized world. Electric light was qualitatively different from anything that had come before. Gaslight was brighter than candles or oil lamps, yes, but electric light was brilliant, unwavering, cold white instead of warm yellow. It transformed night into a harsh approximation of day. Night became a commodity, a time to extend shopping, entertainment, labor consumption. Department stores remained open after dark, their windows brilliantly illuminated to attract customers. Theaters scheduled evening performances that would have been impossible in the gas era. Restaurants, nightclubs, dance halls, an entire economy of nighttime entertainment emerged. The phrase nightlife entered common usage in the 1920s. Night was no longer time for sleep, prayer, and quiet contemplation. Night became life, activity, excitement, opportunity. Workers could be scheduled for shifts at any hour. Factories ran continuously, 3 shifts covering 24 hours. The distinction between day and night work became merely administrative rather than fundamental. Sleep became an inconvenience, something to minimize. The modern boast, "I'll sleep when I'm dead," emerged from this era. Sleep was repositioned as weakness, laziness, wasted time. Productivity culture demanded wakefulness. Television brought artificial light directly into homes, into bedrooms. Families stayed awake watching programs scheduled for their entertainment value rather than sleeping when darkness fell. Late-night television created audiences of people postponing sleep. The invention of the alarm clock, mass-produced and affordable by the 1920s, meant sleep could be forcibly interrupted at any hour to meet work schedules. Natural waking disappeared. For most employed people, sleep became compressed into whatever hours remained between the end of evening entertainment and the morning alarm. Caffeine consumption skyrocketed. Coffee had been available for centuries, but its use as a tool to combat sleepiness and maintain alertness at unnatural hours became standard. Tea, coffee, and later caffeinated soft drinks became essential to modern life. Chemical props holding up artificial schedules. The health consequences appeared quickly. By the 1950s, doctors were documenting epidemic levels of insomnia, anxiety, and what they called stress-related disorders. Heart disease, ulcers, hypertension, all increased dramatically in industrial societies. Sleep researchers began studying what they called sleep hygiene and sleep disorders. The medical establishment recognized that something had gone profoundly wrong with how modern people slept, but most approached it as individual pathology rather than collective deviation from evolutionary norms. Sleeping pills became one of the most prescribed medications in developed countries. Barbiturates first, then benzodiazepines, then newer sleep aids. Millions of people required chemical intervention to achieve what their ancestors had experienced naturally. In the 1990s and 2000s, sleep science advanced dramatically. Researchers began documenting the massive sleep deficit afflicting developed nations. The findings were alarming. The average American adult sleeps 6.5 hours per night. This represents a decrease of nearly 2 hours from pre-electric averages. The Centers for Disease Control declared insufficient sleep a public health epidemic in 2014. But duration is only part of the story. Quality matters as much as quantity. And modern sleep quality is profoundly compromised by factors our ancestors never faced. Light pollution. Even in bedrooms, most people are exposed to ambient light from street lights, electronic devices, LED indicators on appliances. This light suppresses melatonin production, the hormone that regulates sleep-wake cycles. Studies show that exposure to even dim light during sleep hours disrupts circadian rhythms and reduces sleep quality. Blue light from screens, phones, tablets, computers, televisions is particularly disruptive. Blue wavelengths suppress melatonin more effectively than other wavelengths. Exposure to screens in the hours before bed delays sleep onset and reduces sleep quality. A 2015 study found that people who read on backlit devices before bed took longer to fall asleep, had less REM sleep, and felt less alert in the morning compared to people who read printed books by dim light. Noise pollution affects sleep quality. Traffic sounds, sirens, neighbors, air conditioning units, airplanes. The modern soundscape rarely offers the quiet our ancestors experienced. Studies show that chronic noise exposure during sleep, even when it doesn't wake the sleeper, increases stress hormones and cardiovascular strain. Temperature affects sleep. Humans evolved to sleep in cooling environments. As darkness fell, temperature dropped, signaling the body to sleep. Modern climate control keeps indoor temperatures constant. While this prevents dangerous cold or heat, it also eliminates a natural circadian cue. Some sleep researchers recommend cooler sleeping environments to mimic natural conditions. Social jet lag, the term for the mismatch between biological rhythms and social schedules, affects most working people. Your body wants to sleep and wake at certain times based on your chronotype, whether you're naturally a morning person or night person. But work and school schedules force everyone onto the same clock regardless of biology. A natural night owl, someone whose circadian rhythm is shifted later, might naturally fall asleep at 1 a.m. and wake at 9 a.m. But if they must be at work by 8 a.m., they're chronically sleep-deprived and fighting their biology every day. Modern sleep researchers estimate that social jet lag affects 60 to 70% of the population in industrialized countries. People accumulate sleep debt during the work week, then binge sleep on weekends trying to recover, a pattern that never fully compensates for chronic deprivation. The health consequences are severe and well documented. Insufficient or poor quality sleep increases risk of people sleeping less than 6 hours per night have significantly higher rates of heart attack and stroke. Sleep deprivation increases blood pressure and inflammation. Metabolic disorders. Chronic sleep loss disrupts glucose metabolism and increases risk of type 2 diabetes. Sleep affects hormones that regulate appetite. Insufficient sleep increases hunger and preference for high-calorie foods, contributing to obesity. Immune system dysfunction. Sleep deprivation reduces production of infection-fighting antibodies. People who sleep less than 7 hours are 3 times more likely to develop a cold when exposed to the virus compared to people sleeping 8 hours or more. Mental health impacts. Insufficient sleep strongly correlates with depression and anxiety. The relationship is bidirectional. Sleep problems contribute to mental health disorders, and mental health disorders disrupt sleep. Cognitive impairment. Sleep deprivation affects memory, attention, decision-making, and reaction time. After 17 hours of sustained wakefulness, cognitive and motor performance deteriorates to levels equivalent to a blood alcohol content of 0.05%, legally drunk in many jurisdictions. Cancer risk. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies night shift work as probably carcinogenic to humans due to circadian disruption. Studies show increased rates of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and colorectal cancer among chronic night shift workers. Medical errors increase dramatically during night shifts. Transportation accidents peak in early morning hours when circadian alertness is lowest. Industrial accidents show similar patterns. The human cost of forcing workers to override their biology is measured in deaths and injuries. All of this stems from a fundamental mismatch. Humans evolved for millions of years to sleep in darkness, to wake with light, to follow natural rhythms. We've spent barely a century trying to override those rhythms with artificial lighting and social schedules. The experiment is failing. Our bodies are rebelling. The epidemic of sleep disorders, chronic diseases, and mental health problems in developed nations represents biology protesting against modernity. Chapter 6. The Return of the Watch. But something interesting is happening. As knowledge of segmented sleep spreads through publications of historians like Roger Eckerch and sleep scientists like Thomas Ware, some people are experimenting with reclaiming the watch. They stop fighting middle-of-night wakefulness. When they wake naturally after 3 or 4 hours of sleep, instead of watching the clock and calculating lost sleep hours, instead of reaching for pills or turning on the television, they simply rest. They lie in darkness. They think. They pray or meditate. They read by dim light. They write in journals. And many report the same experience their subjects described. The anxiety disappears. The waking period becomes peaceful, even welcome, a time of unusual clarity and calm. After an hour or two, sleep returns naturally. This is not a prescription. Modern life makes true segmented sleep difficult for most people. Morning alarm clocks don't care whether you've had your full second sleep. Work schedules don't accommodate natural rhythms. But for people with flexible schedules, retirees, self-employed workers, those able to structure their own time, rediscovering the watch offers relief from what they've been told was chronic insomnia. A growing movement advocates for sleep hygiene that mimics pre-electric conditions as much as possible within modern life. The recommendations echo practices our ancestors followed naturally. Dim lights in the evening. Use warm-toned bulbs rather than blue-white. Avoid screens for 2 hours before bed. Or use blue light blocking software and glasses. Allow darkness to signal the body that sleep time approaches. Keep bedrooms dark. Blackout curtains. Cover or eliminate LED lights on electronics. Even small amounts of light during sleep suppress melatonin and fragment sleep. Keep bedrooms cool. The optimal sleep temperature is around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, cooler than most people keep their homes. Cool temperatures mimic the natural nighttime temperature drop that signals sleep. Establish consistent sleep-wake times, even on weekends. The body's circadian rhythm thrives on consistency. Irregular schedules create perpetual jet lag. Avoid caffeine after early afternoon. Caffeine has a half-life of 5 to 6 hours, meaning half the caffeine from a 4 p.m. coffee is still in your system at 10 p.m. Create bedtime rituals that signal transition to sleep. Our ancestors had prayers, washing, hair braiding, fire tending. Modern equivalents might be reading, stretching, meditation, or warm baths. None of this is revolutionary. It's simply returning to patterns that governed human sleep for millennia before electricity disrupted them. Some people go further, seeking experiences of true darkness. Dark sky tourism has grown. Travel to remote areas with no light pollution, where the night sky appears as our ancestors saw it, brilliant with stars. The experience of seeing a truly dark sky, one unpolluted by artificial light, moves people profoundly. Many describe it as spiritual, overwhelming, a connection to something vast that modernity has severed. Astronomers advocate for dark sky preserves and light pollution reduction, not just for scientific observation, but for human well-being. The loss of darkness, they argue, is an environmental crisis as significant as air or water pollution. Some municipalities have adopted dark sky ordinances, regulations limiting outdoor lighting to reduce light pollution. Flagstaff, Arizona, was the first international dark sky city. Others have followed. These are small steps. Light pollution continues to increase globally, but awareness is growing that we've lost something essential. That perpetual light comes with costs we didn't anticipate. When we lost the night, we lost more than darkness. We lost connection to rhythms that governed life for millions of years. We lost the watch, that peaceful hour of contemplation between sleeps. We lost the profound quiet that allowed hearing one's own thoughts. We lost the brilliant stars that showed our smallness in the cosmos. We lost the practice of existing without purpose during dark hours. Pre-electric nights demanded rest. You couldn't work effectively. You couldn't travel safely. You couldn't engage in most daytime activities. Night forced withdrawal from productivity into being rather than doing. Modernity has no space for being without doing. Even our rest must be productive, optimized, measured, quantified with sleep tracking devices. We turn rest itself into a task to be managed. We lost communal sleep, the intimacy of sharing vulnerable hours with others. We gained privacy, yes, which offers benefits, but we lost the comfort of breathing in synchrony with bedmates, the knowledge that we were not alone in darkness. We lost synchrony with seasons. Our ancestors slept longer in winter when nights stretched to 14 hours, shorter in summer when nights contracted to 8. Their sleep expanded and contracted with the seasons, matching available light. We sleep the same 7 hours year-round, forcing consistency where nature offered variation. We lost the understanding that different stages of life require different sleep. Children need more sleep than adults. Elderly people often return to polyphasic sleep patterns, napping during day, sleeping lighter at night. Traditional societies accommodated this. Modern society tries to force everyone onto identical schedules regardless of age or biological need. We lost tolerance for darkness. Children growing up with night lights, street lights visible through windows, electronic devices in bedrooms. Many modern humans have never experienced true darkness. The primal comfort of darkness as rest, as safety, as natural. This has been replaced by fear of darkness as dangerous, unproductive, something to be banished. Most significantly, we lost the understanding that sleep is sacred. Pre-electric cultures treated sleep with reverence. Sleep was when the soul traveled, when God spoke, when the body healed, when the day's experiences consolidated into memory and wisdom. Modern culture treats sleep as inconvenient necessity at best, laziness at worst. You snooze, you lose. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Sleep is for the weak. These phrases reveal our disdain for rest. This disdain has consequences. We're the sickest, most anxious, most sleep-deprived generation in human history, despite having more material comfort and medical knowledge than any previous era. The irony is profound. We've conquered darkness, defeated night, extended the productive day to 24 hours, and in doing so, we've damaged our health, our minds, our well-being in ways we're only beginning to understand. Can we reclaim what was lost? Not fully. We cannot uninvent electricity or return to pre-industrial life. nor would most people want to. Artificial light has brought genuine benefits: safety, extended opportunities for learning and culture, medical care available at all hours, emergency services operating continuously. But we can reclaim elements of the old patterns. We can choose to dim lights in evening. We can banish blue screens from bedrooms. We can accept middle-of-night wakefulness as normal rather than pathological. We can stop fighting our biology quite so hard. Some communities are experimenting with this. Intentional communities where evening electric lights dim or extinguish early, where residents gather by candlelight or firelight, where sleep is treated as communal rest rather than individual isolation. These are rare and will likely remain so, but they represent acknowledgement that something important was lost. On a personal level, many people are making smaller changes, installing dimmer switches and using them in evening, replacing LED bulbs with warm-toned lights, reading paper books instead of tablets before bed, meditating during middle-of-night wakings rather than reaching for pills. These small acts of resistance against perpetual light will not reverse light pollution or reshape work schedules, but they offer individual relief, a sense of alignment with something deeper than modern schedules, a reconnection, however tentative, with patterns that governed our ancestors. Perhaps what we can reclaim most fully is not the practices themselves, but the attitude towards sleep, the understanding that sleep is not wasted time, but essential restoration. That rest is not laziness, but biological necessity. That darkness is not evil, but natural. We can reclaim reverence for sleep, recognition that when we sleep, we participate in rhythms older than civilization. That sleep connects us to every human who ever lived, all of whom slept under the same stars we can no longer see. This perspective shift costs nothing and requires no technology. It simply requires acknowledging that modernity got something profoundly wrong, that in our rush to conquer darkness and extend productivity, we damaged something essential. And perhaps, with that acknowledgement, we can begin to repair what we've broken. Before cities, before writing, before agriculture even, humans gathered around fires as darkness fell. This was the original bedroom, the fire circle, the boundary between the human world and the wild darkness beyond. For hundreds of thousands of years, far longer than we've practiced farming, far longer than we've built cities, this was how humans prepared for sleep. Gathered, fire at the center, darkness pressing in from all sides, the sounds of a night world beginning its own life. Sleep, in this context, was profoundly vulnerable and profoundly communal. To sleep was to trust the group to maintain the fire, to keep watch for predators, to wake you if danger approached. To sleep was to surrender consciousness while surrounded by threats, both real and imagined. This is the evolutionary context for human sleep. Not isolated in locked rooms, not alone behind walls, but together in partial darkness, with the wild night pressing close. Our brains evolved in this context. The neural architecture that governs our sleep developed around fires in the African savanna, in caves, in simple shelters. This is the sleep environment we're adapted to. What does that environment look like? Darkness, but not complete. The fire provides flickering light. Variable temperature, warmer near the fire, cooler at the edges. Proximity to others, their breathing, their warmth, their presence, natural sounds, wind, animals, the crack of burning wood, the smell of smoke and earth and bodies. Modern sleep environments could hardly be more different. Yet our brains still expect those ancient conditions. The infant who won't sleep alone, perhaps their brain still expects the presence of protective adults the way it did for hundreds of thousands of years. The adult who sleeps better with white noise, perhaps mimicking the constant environmental sounds of ancient nights. The need for security during sleep runs deep in human psychology. We lock doors, we close curtains, we create boundaries between our sleeping selves and potential threats. This is ancient behavior manifesting in modern contexts. For most of human history, sleeping meant sleeping under the stars, or at least under rudimentary shelter that barely blocked the sky. The night sky was the ceiling. The stars were companions to sleep. Every culture developed relationships with the night sky. Constellations told stories. The movements of stars and planets marked seasons and guided navigation. The moon measured time. The sky was a clock, a calendar, a storybook, and a connection to the divine. Modern humans, sleeping under electric lights in cities where stars are invisible, have lost this relationship. We've lost the experience of sleeping beneath the cosmos, of seeing our smallness in the vast universe before closing our eyes. This was a fundamental part of the sleep experience for our ancestors. The stars were there when they lay down, and when they woke, during the watch, and when they rose at dawn. The celestial movements structured their understanding of time itself. Sleep was sacred, not metaphorically, literally sacred. A time when the boundary between physical and spiritual worlds grew thin. In ancient Egypt, sleep was when the body to travel. The journey of the soul each night mirrored the journey of the sun god Ra through the underworld. To sleep was to rehearse death, to journey to the land of the dead and return. Dreams were messages from gods or the deceased. Temple sleep incubation, deliberately sleeping in sacred spaces to receive divine dreams, was practiced across the ancient world. In Egypt, Greece, Rome, Mesopotamia, India, priests prepared supplicants through fasting, ritual bathing, prayers. The supplicants slept in the temple, and the god visited in dreams, providing healing, prophecy, or guidance. This wasn't superstition divorced from reality. Modern research shows that sleep does facilitate problem-solving, creativity, and insight. The sleeping brain makes connections the waking mind misses. Sleeping on it genuinely helps with difficult decisions. Medieval Christian mystics understood night as privileged time for encountering God. The dark hours when the world slept or when the soul could focus entirely on divine presence. Monastic schedules structured night around prayer precisely because night offered spiritual opportunity unavailable in daylight. The watch, that hour between first and second sleep, was considered particularly favorable for prayer and contemplation. The mind was clear, but the world was quiet. No distractions, no demands, just the soul and God in darkness. Many of the great Christian mystical experiences, visions, revelations, encounters with angels, occurred during night vigils. Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Julian of Norwich, their transformative experiences came in darkness, in states between sleeping and waking. Islamic tradition holds the last third of the night, the pre-dawn hours, as the most blessed time for prayer. God descends to the lowest heaven in these hours to hear petitions. Devout Muslims rise for tahajjud, voluntary night prayers, seeking closeness to God when the world sleeps. Hinduism and Buddhism both recognize night meditation as powerful practice. The mind in late night or pre-dawn hours is naturally quieter, less turbulent than during busy day. Many meditation traditions recommend rising before dawn for practice, taking advantage of the peaceful transition from sleep to waking. Across religious and spiritual traditions, a consistent pattern, night, darkness, and sleep are recognized as spiritually significant. Not mere absence of day, but a different realm with its own rules, its own opportunities for transcendence. Modern secularism has largely abandoned this understanding. Sleep is biological necessity, nothing more. Dreams are random neural firing, not messages. Night is simply hours without sun, to be filled with work or entertainment or eliminated with lighting. But perhaps the traditional wisdom recognized something true. Perhaps the state between sleeping and waking does offer access to parts of consciousness, usually obscured by daylight demands. Perhaps darkness and quiet do facilitate insights, creativity, spiritual experiences that artificial light and constant stimulation prevent. Dreams shaped history, not metaphorically, literally. Major historical events turned on visions received in sleep. Constantine the Great, Roman emperor, reportedly saw a vision in a dream the night before the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 CE. A cross appeared with the words, "In this sign conquer." He ordered his soldiers to paint the Christian symbol on their shields. They won the battle. Constantine converted to Christianity and made it the religion of the Roman Empire, fundamentally altering the course of Western civilization. Did Constantine actually have this dream, or was it propaganda created afterward? Historians debate, but the story's power lies in its plausibility, that an emperor would make world-changing decisions based on a dream. Because in the ancient world, dreams were taken that seriously. The biblical Joseph rose from prisoner to second in command of Egypt by interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. 7 fat cows followed by 7 thin cows, 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Joseph's interpretation led to storing grain during abundance, saving Egypt and surrounding nations from starvation. True history or mythology? Again, what matters is the underlying assumption that dreams contain crucial information about the future, that proper interpretation of dreams affects the fate of nations, that sleep is when divine communication occurs. Muhammad, the founder of Islam, received his first revelation during sleep. The angel Gabriel appeared commanding him to recite. This night vision on Mount Hira began Islam's emergence. Later revelations came during sleep or trance states, The religion that would shape 1 billion lives and half the world's geography began with visions received in altered consciousness. Joan of Arc heard voices in her sleep and waking visions telling her to drive the English from France and crown the Dauphin. A teenage peasant girl, guided by visions she received in altered states of consciousness, led armies and changed the course of the 100 Years' War. Abraham Lincoln dreamed of his own assassination days before it occurred. According to his bodyguard's account, he saw himself lying in state in the White House. Heard mourners saying, "The president is dead." Whether true or apocryphal, the story reflects the cultural belief that important events cast shadows forward into dreams. These are dramatic examples, but ordinary people throughout history made decisions based on dreams. Where to travel, whom to marry, whether to undertake dangerous ventures. Dreams were consulted as oracles, as divine guidance, as windows into hidden truth. The modern dismissal of dreams as meaningless represents a radical break with the entirety of human history. For thousands of years, across every culture, dreams were taken seriously. They were analyzed, interpreted, acted upon. They shaped individual decisions and collective histories. Modern neuroscience offers explanations. Dreams as memory consolidation, as emotional processing, as random neural activity during REM sleep. These explanations may be accurate, but they don't necessarily contradict the older understanding that dreams contain valuable information. If dreams consolidate learning and process emotions, then they do reveal important psychological truths. If the sleeping brain makes connections the waking mind misses, then dreams do offer insights worth heeding. The mechanism may be neurological rather than divine, but the utility remains. Perhaps what we've lost is not the reality of dreams, but the practice of attending to them, of treating them as worth remembering, contemplating, learning from. We've lost the habit of asking, "What might this dream be telling me?" in favor of dismissing dreams as nonsense. Silence, true silence. When was the last time most modern humans experienced it? Not quiet. Silence. The absence of human-generated sound. No traffic. No airplanes. No machinery. No electronic hum. No distant sirens or music or voices. Nothing but wind and perhaps the sounds of animals or weather. This was the acoustic environment of pre-electric sleep. The default soundscape was quiet, so profound that a pin dropping could be heard across a room. In this silence, every sound had meaning. Footsteps in the night meant someone approaching, friend, stranger, or threat. The creak of a door, the bark of a dog, the call of an owl. Each sound stood out clearly, carried information, demanded attention. The human ear evolved in this silence. Our hearing is extraordinarily sensitive because for most of evolutionary history, detecting faint sounds meant survival. The crack of a twig might be a predator. The rustle of grass might be prey or danger. In profound silence, the body's own sounds become audible. Your heartbeat, your breathing, the movement of blood through vessels near your ears, digestion, the minute creaking of joints. You become aware of your body as a living system of sounds normally drowned by environmental noise. This internal soundscape was part of the sleep experience. For our ancestors, in the quiet of night, lying in bed, you heard yourself breathe, heard your heart, heard the breath of those sleeping nearby. This created intimacy, an awareness of life continuing even in rest, of bodies maintaining themselves through the vulnerable hours. Modern humans sleep in noise. Even in quiet bedrooms, there's ambient sound, refrigerator hum, heating or cooling systems, traffic in distance, neighbors through walls. We've adapted to the point where many people find total silence unsettling. They need white noise machines or fans running to sleep. This represents an extraordinary shift. We've gone from silence being the default, with sound standing out as significant, to noise being constant and silence feeling abnormal. The health effects of chronic noise exposure during sleep are well documented. Increased stress hormones, elevated blood pressure, cardiovascular strain. Even when noise doesn't wake us, it affects sleep quality and physical stress levels. But beyond health effects, we've lost the experience of sleeping in profound quiet. The sense of peace that comes from being held in silence, the awareness of your own life, sounds, the ability to hear the world settling around you. The gift of darkness, perhaps the greatest loss, is darkness itself, not as evil or danger, but as gift. True darkness, the kind where stars blaze so brightly you can see by their light, where the Milky Way casts shadows. This darkness has vanished from most of the inhabited world. Light pollution now affects 80% of the global population. In the United States and Europe, 99% of people live under light-polluted skies. Most children growing up in cities have never seen the Milky Way. This represents the loss of one of the most profound human experiences, sleeping beneath the stars, seeing yourself as part of a vast cosmos, experiencing the scale of the universe before closing your eyes to sleep. Our ancestors, sleeping under these stars, knew their smallness, knew the vastness of creation. This cultivated humility, wonder, perspective. The night sky reminded humans of their place, significant but not central, conscious but not all-knowing, alive but temporary. Children growing up under light-polluted skies never experienced the night that shaped human consciousness for millennia. They never see themselves in cosmic context, never experience the humbling vastness of a truly dark sky. This loss is not trivial. Connection to the natural world, including the night sky, affects psychological development. Biophilia, the innate human affinity for nature, includes affinity for natural darkness and the celestial sphere. Studies show that experiences of natural darkness and star-filled skies produce feelings of awe, wonder, transcendence. These experiences reduce stress, increase prosocial behavior, and provide perspective that improves mental health. By eliminating darkness, we've eliminated these benefits. We've created a world where night is merely dim day, where sleep occurs in artificial environments, disconnected from natural rhythms, where the cosmos is invisible. People who experience truly dark skies for the first time as adults often have powerful emotional reactions. They cry. They fall silent in awe. They describe feeling connected to something vast and meaningful that modern life had hidden from them. This is the darkness our ancestors knew. This is the ceiling under which they slept. This is the night that shaped human consciousness, spirituality, philosophy, science. We've traded it for the convenience of artificial light, for the ability to work and shop and be entertained at all hours, for the illusion that we've conquered nature, transcended our biological limits. But bodies know what we've lost: sleep disorders, circadian disruption, disconnection from natural rhythms, mental health crises. These are symptoms of misalignment with the darkness our biology expects. Perhaps the gift of darkness was not just practical, the absence of light forcing rest, but spiritual. Darkness as sacred time, as threshold space, as connection to mystery, cosmos, the divine, as reminder that we are small and temporary and part of something vast. We've lost that gift, but darkness waits, patient, for those who choose to seek it. And so we return to where we began, to the question of how humans slept before electricity, before the theft of night, before we convinced ourselves that conquering darkness was progress. The answer is both simple and profound. They slept in rhythm with darkness. They slept in community. They slept in segments, waking naturally in the quiet hours to tend fires, pray, talk, contemplate. They slept under stars that reminded them of their place in the cosmos. They slept in silence that let them hear the world and themselves. They slept in darkness so complete that sleep was the only reasonable response. And they did not consider this deprivation. They considered it natural, the way life was meant to be lived. Pre-electric sleep was embedded in wisdom traditions. Grandmothers taught grandchildren how to prepare for sleep, prayers to say, rituals to follow, ways to make the transition from waking to sleeping sacred rather than merely functional. This knowledge was transmitted not through books, but through practice, through watching elders, through participating in household rhythms, through learning that sleep was not an individual act, but part of family and community life. The wisdom included practical knowledge: how to bank a fire so it lasted through night, how to position bed curtains to block drafts, which herbs promoted restful sleep when tucked into mattresses or hung above beds, how to read weather signs to know if shutters should be closed tight or left slightly open for air. But it also included deeper understanding that sleep was vulnerable time requiring protection, physical, spiritual, communal, that dreams carried meaning worth attending to, that the transition between waking and sleeping deserved ritual respect, that rest was not laziness, but biological and spiritual necessity. Traditional herbalism recognized plants that promoted sleep: chamomile, lavender, valerian, lemon balm, passion flower. These weren't superstitions. Modern pharmacology confirms these plants contain compounds that affect neurotransmitters related to sleep and relaxation. Our ancestors didn't understand the chemistry, but they knew what worked. Chamomile tea before bed, lavender sachets in pillows, valerian root for those who struggled to sleep. This was empirical knowledge accumulated over generations. They also understood what disrupted sleep: heavy meals too close to bedtime, alcohol in excess. It might help you fall asleep, but degraded sleep quality, anxiety, and unresolved conflicts carried to bed. The importance of relieving bladder and bowels before sleep to avoid nighttime waking. Modern sleep science has validated much of this traditional wisdom while adding detail about mechanisms, but the knowledge itself was there, embedded in cultural practices our ancestors followed without needing peer-reviewed studies. We cannot fully return to pre-electric sleep patterns, work schedules, modern responsibilities, urban environments. These create constraints our ancestors didn't face. But we can reclaim elements. We can make choices that honor our biology, even while living in modernity. We can dim lights in the evening, use warm-toned bulbs, avoid screens before bed, create darkness in bedrooms, real darkness, not the LED-studded twilight most people sleep in. We can choose silence over constant noise, or at least minimize disruptive sounds. We can stop pathologizing middle-of-night waking. When we wake after 3 or 4 hours of sleep, instead of reaching for pills or phones, we can simply rest, lie in darkness, think, pray if we're inclined, journal if it helps. Accept the watch as natural rather than fighting it as insomnia. We can create bedtime rituals that signal the transition to sleep. Not elaborate, just consistent. Reading, stretching, meditation, washing, anything that tells the body, now we enter sleep time. We can seek experiences of true darkness, visit dark sky preserves, camp in remote areas, travel to places where night still means night. Let ourselves experience the stars as our ancestors saw them. We can advocate for dark sky protection in our communities, support ordinances that reduce light pollution, choose outdoor lighting that's dimmer, directed downward, used only when needed. We can reconnect with the understanding that sleep is sacred, not productivity lost, but restoration gained, not wasted time, but essential maintenance of body and mind and spirit. These are small steps, individual choices that won't transform society, but they offer relief, alignment, a sense of working with biology rather than against it. And perhaps, if enough people rediscover the peace of sleeping in harmony with darkness, if enough people reject the tyranny of perpetual light and forced wakefulness, collective change becomes possible. Perhaps we can begin healing the damage we've done to our relationship with night. Despite everything that's changed, sleep remains. The body's need for rest hasn't altered. Circadian rhythms still operate. The brain still requires sleep for consolidation, restoration, healing. What's changed is our relationship with sleep, our understanding of it, our respect for it, the environment in which it occurs. But the fundamental rhythm continues. Day yields to night. Activity yields to rest. Waking consciousness yields to sleep. This is written into our biology at the deepest levels, written into the rotation of the earth and the evolution of life itself. Every human who ever lived has slept. Every human now living will sleep tonight. Every human yet to be born will need sleep. This is the great equalizer, the universal experience that crosses all boundaries of time, culture, status, belief. From space, Earth's rotation creates an eternal cycle. The terminator, the line between day and night, sweeps continuously around the planet. At this moment, roughly half of humanity sleeps while the other half wakes. In a few hours, the balance will shift. This has been happening since humans first appeared, will continue happening as long as humans exist. The great rhythm of sleeping and waking, darkness and light, activity and rest, we can work with this rhythm or against it. We can honor it or fight it. We can recognize ourselves as part of a pattern billions of years old, or we can pretend we've transcended biology through technology. But the rhythm continues regardless. Our bodies know, even when our minds forget. Think of all the humans who slept before us. Billions of individuals across thousands of generations, each one settling down as darkness fell, each one vulnerable in sleep, each one trusting in whatever protections they had. Doors, walls, companions, gods, luck. They slept in caves and under stars, in mud huts and stone castles, in tents and ships. They slept in sickness and health, in peace and war, in comfort and hardship. They woke during the watch and thought their thoughts, prayed their prayers, tended their fires. They dreamed dreams that sometimes changed their lives or history. They rose with dawn or cockcrow or church bells and began another day. Most of them are forgotten. No records remain of their lives, their thoughts, their dreams. But they lived. They slept. They participated in the same rhythm we participate in tonight. We are part of this great chain, connected to everyone who slept before us and everyone who will sleep after. Connected by the shared experience of closing our eyes and surrendering consciousness, of trusting that we'll wake again, of resting in darkness. This is humbling, comforting. We are not alone in this necessity, not isolated in our vulnerability. We are part of something vast and continuous. When you sleep tonight, you join this eternal communion. You do what countless humans have done before you. You participate in a rhythm older than civilization, older than language, older than humanity itself. Sleep predates humans. Every mammal sleeps. Every bird sleeps. Reptiles, fish, even insects show sleep-like states. Sleep is ancient beyond imagining. Written into the fabric of life itself, we are temporary participants in an eternal process. Here for a brief moment, sleeping our few decades of nights, then passing on. But the rhythm continues. Others will sleep after us, as others slept before. Whether you are religious or secular, whether you pray to gods or simply acknowledge the mystery of existence, this transition to sleep deserves marking. Not with elaborate ritual necessarily, just acknowledgement, gratitude, perhaps, for the body that has carried you through another day, for the darkness that allows rest, for the mysterious process that will restore you while you sleep. Our ancestors had their prayers, their rituals, their ways of honoring the transition from waking to sleeping. We can create our own, or we can simply pause. Notice, acknowledge, I have lived another day. I am grateful I release the day's burdens. I trust the night. I surrender to sleep, knowing I participate in something ancient and necessary. May my rest be peaceful. May I wake renewed. Something like that, or nothing at all. Just the intention, the recognition that sleep is not trivial but sacred, not wasted time but essential restoration. As you prepare for sleep tonight, whether immediately or hours from now, consider the millions of years of evolution that have shaped this moment, the biological imperative driving you toward rest, the circadian rhythms responding to darkness, the brain preparing to consolidate the day's experiences into memory. Consider the billions of humans who have lain down before you, who closed their eyes despite uncertainty about tomorrow, who trusted in sleep despite its vulnerability, who surrendered consciousness to the mystery of rest. You are part of this great continuity, this eternal rhythm, this shared human experience. Perhaps, if you wake in the night, you'll remember the watch. Remember that for most of human history, waking after a few hours was normal and expected. Not insomnia, but nature. Not dysfunction, but the ancient pattern reasserting itself. Perhaps you'll rest in that waking rather than fighting it. Perhaps you'll think quiet thoughts or pray quiet prayers or simply exist in the liminal space between sleeps. Perhaps you'll experience what your ancestors do, that this hour has its own character, its own peace, its own gifts. The night settles over the land. Stars emerge. Temperature drops. Darkness deepens. The world transitions from the business of day to the quiet of night. In cities, the transition is muted, artificial lights continuing, activity persisting. But even there, even in the brightest urban centers, people eventually sleep. The biological imperative overcomes the electric lie that night has been conquered. In places where darkness still exists, where artificial light hasn't completely banished night, the transition is profound, visible, felt. The world changes character, becomes different. The night world with its own rules, its own sounds, its own atmosphere. And across this landscape, humans sleep, in beds and on sofas, and occasionally in less comfortable places, some alone, some with partners, some with children or pets, some in silence, some with machines humming, some in darkness, some with lights left on to ward off ancient fears. Some sleep deeply, in the restorative, slow-wave sleep their bodies need. Some dream, brains active in REM sleep processing the day. Some lie in the lighter stages, easily roused, maintaining vigilance even in rest. Some will wake during the night, the ancient watch reasserting itself despite modern schedules. Some will struggle with insomnia, fighting sleeplessness that might ease if they stopped fighting. Some will sleep uninterrupted, the full night passing without conscious awareness. But all are participating in the same fundamental process: surrendering consciousness, trusting the night, allowing the body to rest and restore, doing what humans have always done when darkness falls. This is not trivial. This is essential. This is sacred. Perhaps you're listening to this as you prepare for sleep, or perhaps it's playing as you drift already toward unconsciousness. Either way, the invitation is the same, not as failure or weakness or wasted time, but as ancient practice, as biological necessity, as participation in the rhythm that has sustained life for eons. Release the day. Whatever happened, successes or failures, joys or sorrows, accomplishments or disappointments, the day is done. It has passed into history. You cannot change it now. You can only rest. Release worry about tomorrow. Whatever awaits, challenges or opportunities, known or unknown, it will come regardless of your nighttime anxiety. Better to rest now, to restore your resources, to meet tomorrow from a place of rest rather than exhaustion. Let yourself drift. Your body knows what to do. Millions of years of evolution have prepared you for this. Your brain will cycle through sleep stages without your conscious direction. Your body will repair and restore itself. Your mind will process and consolidate and dream. You need only let go. Stop trying to control. Stop thinking about sleeping and simply sleep. The darkness is not your enemy. The night is not dangerous. You are safe. You are held by the same rhythms that have held every human who ever lived. Your breathing slows, deepens, your muscles relax, your thoughts become less linear, more associative, images appear without logical connection. You are drifting on the edge between waking and sleeping. Let yourself tip over that edge. Let consciousness release. Let sleep take you. The ancient rhythms take over. Your heart rate slows to its resting pace. Your body temperature drops slightly. Your brain waves lengthen and deepen. You descend into the first sleep, the deep restorative sleep your body needs. Perhaps later you'll wake naturally during the watch. Perhaps you'll rest in peaceful wakefulness for an hour. Perhaps you'll have dreams that seem significant, that carry meaning, that connect you to something deeper. Or perhaps you'll sleep through until dawn, and that's perfectly fine too. There is no single right way to sleep, only the way that brings you rest. What matters is that you honor this time, that you recognize sleep as sacred, as necessary, as your birthright as a human being, as a mammal, as a living creature on this turning earth. The earth continues turning. Day yields to night, yields to day. This has been happening for billions of years, will continue for billions more. We are temporary participants, here for a brief span, sleeping our nights, waking our days, then passing on, returning to the elements, our atoms recycling into the eternal process. But while we're here, we sleep. We must sleep, cannot avoid it. Should not try. Sleep is not the enemy. It is the ally. It is the restoration. It is the gift that evolution gave us. The rhythm that sustains us, the practice that connects us to every living thing that needs rest. Honor it, respect it. When darkness falls and your body signals tiredness, respond. Prepare yourself with intention. Release the day, welcome the night, and sleep. Sleep well, traveler. You have heard the story of how humans slept before electricity, before we convinced ourselves that night could be conquered and rest was weakness. You know now that sleep is ancient, sacred, essential, that for millions of years, humans have closed their eyes when darkness fell and trusted the night to restore them. Tonight, you join that ancient communion. You do what countless others have done before you. You participate in the rhythm older than civilization. The night surrounds you. The darkness holds you. Your body knows what to do. Release, drift, surrender. Let yourself sleep. The stars wheel overhead. The earth turns. The ancient rhythms continue. And you sleep. As you were meant to sleep. As humans have always slept. In darkness, in peace. In trust, good night.